G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Today we're going to have a bit of a rant about Uluru. We're going to talk about last chance tourism, because come the 1st of October, Uluru is going to be closed to climbers. Now, I'm old enough that I can remember when Uluru was universally called by every person in white Australia Ayers Rock. I might have been 20 years old before I ever heard that the proper name was Uluru. And there are people who are a bit upset about the idea of the climb up the rock being closed. I just heard a fella on the news vowing that he's going to come back in 20 years' time and he's going to climb it again because it's his cultural heritage, traditional right to climb Uluru. And I'm laying a bet he's got no indigenous cultural heritage, but that's what he reckons. Now these last chance tourists, I'm going to give you an example that does not involve Uluru. The basic idea behind last chance tourism seems to be that if you're bright enough to know that something's about to disappear from the face of the earth, and you've probably got enough education to have a good enough job, that somebody can market a travel package at you so you can go and have a look at the wonders of the world before the wonders of the world disappear. And there are lots of these schemes. One of the more appalling I recently heard is the dichotomy around the 2500 movement. There are two ways of looking at it. On the one hand, at latitude 0 on the equator, around the girdle of the earth, there are 25 glaciers. It's 2019. By 2025, there will be 0 glaciers at 0 latitude around the girdle of the earth if we keep warming at the current rate and pace of the progress. So the 2500 club is divided into two parts. One part is saving up their money and spending their resources and time lobbying governments and industry and politicians to do something about it. Whereas the other half of the 2500 organisation, what they're doing is saving up their money and booking ahead so that they can go and have a look at it all before it disappears. Last chance tourism. It is a thing. Did you pick that one? The space shuttle hasn't flown for 10 years. But there was a discovery tour to go and have a look at it back when it was a thing. Okay, so it turns out that this last chance tourism mentality, the psychology, the meme, is being applied to the concept of climbing Uluru. Uluru, which is a great big rock in the centre of the desert. Uluru, which is a sacred place, in a place where there are 500 language groups. Counting Tasmania. And Uluru's out there at the centre, at what they call the red heart of Australia. Now, we probably need a little bit of backstory here. Along this northwest coast of Australia, what they call Western Australia, there's very, very, very good solid archaeological evidence of human settlement 60 to 70,000 years old. There is no evidence of such settlement anywhere else on the place. There's evidence of settlement up here that's 40,000 years old. There's DNA evidence suggesting that the people who came here 40,000 years ago from the land bridge, they fanned out around the coastline, all the way around, and it took maybe 10,000 years to establish those language boundaries, the toweries, the traditional local territories that you see there today. And the DNA evidence says that for the next 40,000 years they didn't move. Ice ages came and went and they didn't move. However, maybe 10, 12,000 years ago, at the end of another ice age, the land bridge, you know, not the first land bridge or the second land bridge, but the most recent land bridge, it submerged. And what that meant was that the Aborigines up there, who used to be inland Aborigines, they suddenly got a beach. And the most startling new development on the beach was a thing they called the striped pipefish, aka the rainbow serpent. And they started a whole new religion that talked about the old way of life being washed away and the new way of life coming along to replace it. And in the new way of life, everything had changed, so you had to pay a lot of attention to the environment and the ecology and how the land works. And the whole new religion of the rainbow serpent was dedicated to looking after the ecology. Each person had their totemic animal that they didn't ever hunt or eat, and they looked after it and they got friends with it. And they spent their life dedicated to looking after it, but everybody also spent their whole life looking after the land. You couldn't walk across somebody else's territory without stopping and asking for permission, and they wouldn't give it to you until after you'd learnt their language before you moved on to the next one. So there wasn't a great deal of travelling around, but there were quartz axes quarried in Darwin, which were found in the ground at Melbourne. There were trade routes. There was tidgery and pidgery, native nicotine-bearing plants grown where the Queensland-New South Wales border is these days, and it was traded all over the country. There were people who had enough knowledge to cross 5, 10 toweries and then trade with somebody else. Well, it took 1,000 years for this rainbow serpent religion to make its way from Cape York and Arnhem Land, where they had a beach for the striped pipefish to be washed up onto. And the earliest rainbow serpents painted on cave walls up there have about 150 different recognisable features of a striped pipefish. And the further inland you come, the less experienced people have actually seen a striped pipefish. So instead they start looking at the rainbows in the sky, and you get less identifiable features of an actual fish and more identifiable features of what you can see in the sky. And by the time you get in here to Uluru, by Uluru, you're down to sort of 40 or 50 features of a striped pipefish. And the elders are teaching kids to look at the planets as they move around the ecliptic or across the ecliptic against the background of the stars, and the rainbow serpent has become, on the one hand, a map showing your way around the waterholes, and on the other hand, it's become symbolic of the solar serpent flying across the sky of the stars. By the time you get down here to Melbourne, the rainbow serpents are found down there lucky to have 30 identifiable features of a striped pipefish as found 10 or 12,000 years ago on the coast when the land bridge to New Guinea submerged. But the point is, everybody's got that same religion, or a variation thereof, with local different deities and spirits and the different languages, but that's kind of like how it all works. And Uluru is the biggest, greatest, most sacred spot. And it's considered extremely bad manners to climb up on top of Uluru, because the climb takes time and people working physically hard, climbing vertically up a rock in the sunlight, are thirsty. And when they get to the top of the rock, they have a great big drink of their water bottle, and then they relieve their bladder on top of the most sacred landscape feature in a land where every tree and rock and fold and hollow in the ground has a story behind it, and tens of thousands of years of human habitation, of human cultural, spiritual investment in the place. And some of them empty their bowels, and some of them change their tampons, and some of them change their sanitary pads as well, on top of Uluru. That's why I speak of colon-ising Australia. You go a long way away from where you come from and you empty your colon all over everything you do not understand. You are a colon-ist. If you think it's a fair thing to go out there and climb up on top of Uluru and shit and piss and change your flaming sanitary products on top of that, then why would it be wrong for an Australian Aborigine to be planning a trip to Westminster Abbey, to go in there and climb up on the altar and shit and piss and have his missus change her tampon there? Why would that be considered sacrilege? If anybody was to think about such a thing. But when a rich, cashed up, foreign, last chance tourist wants to go and shit on top of Uluru, that's considered perfectly acceptable, and anybody who says otherwise is considered to be excessively politically correct and an anti-white racist. Why would that be, perhaps, do you think, in this year of 2019 in Australia, after 230-something years, 38 years of EuroPeon Colon-isation, where people have come here from the other side of the world and they've emptied their colons, their long, muscular tubes full of shit, all over everything they didn't understand. And now they're complaining that the traditional owners of Uluru have said, stop shitting on Uluru. Stop shitting on Uluru. You've fed the ecology to the sheep and you've shat on everything else. Stop shitting on Uluru. As a white Australian, I say stop shitting on Uluru, please. As an alternative, here's what you can do. You can do what my daughter did last year when she visited Uluru. She dug a hole and buried her poo. And in that hole, she excavated sand, and when you dig a hole, you can never fit all the sand back in. So she came away with a bag of Uluru sand, which she bottled and gave away to people who care, people who give a shit. So there you go, Uluru in a bottle. If you go there, dig a hole, bury your shit, take away the excess sand, and you got Christmas presents. And you don't have to climb Uluru and shit on Australia's spiritual cultural heritage. See, I was even polite, and I explained the context. Ciao.